It was my gynecologist's office. Congratulations, you're pregnant with your first child. And it's like, okay, what did the universe just do to me? Willing to say yes and take a chance of not necessarily being great so that you get the opportunity to learn how to be great. Can I bring my baby to work because I'm breastfeeding at a time when you weren't allowed to say the word breastfeeding on television?
Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Terri Cole Show. I had the great honor and good pleasure of interviewing Joan Lunden. So amazing, has done so much for women in entertainment, on her brand new book called Life Beyond the Script. And it's really a beautiful memoir. I got it not long before I needed to interview her, so I had done research before, of course, but I started reading it. It is so good. So if you happen to not know who Joan Lunden is, she was the host of Good Morning America for 17 years. She's done many other television shows. She's written 11 books. She's got 7 kids. But she's really an award-winning journalist, best-selling author, television host, motivational speaker. She's really a true trailblazer in so many ways. When she was on Good Morning America, she actually brought her baby, who actually happens to be a friend of mine, Jamie Hess. It's funny that I was on Jamie's podcast, and that's a bunch of years ago. That's how we actually met. But anyway, and she bringing your baby to work because you were breastfeeding during a time when you couldn't even say the words breastfeeding on the air was really revolutionary. It was radical at that time. And so she is like very quietly impacted the culture. She's always been an advocate, but really she's an icon in broadcast journalism. And I super enjoyed interviewing her for the Terri Cole Show. What an honor and a privilege it was. And I hope that you enjoyed this interview with Joan Lunden as much as I enjoyed interviewing her. I am super excited to welcome one of my heroes, Joan Lunden, to the Terri Cole Show. Welcome to the show, Joan.
Oh, that was such a nice thing to say. Thanks, Terri.
It's so true. This is so exciting, and I'm so excited about this book and your many other books. But before I get into this book, I want to ask you, so many things, but I want to start with asking you, what, if you were like a Marvel movie character, let's say, you know how they all have like origin stories of like why they ended up doing what they did. For you, you have done so much for women, professional women and women in television, and you've really paved the way in so many ways. What would you say about your childhood? I know your dad was a doctor. I know your mom died. Like, what prepared you, or what got you on this path to do what you ended up doing in life?
There was like this inner spark in me when I was a young kid. Right from the get-go, I went into first grade, and, they didn't believe in skipping you back then. It was just like, they just didn't do that. But they would solve it by having like an overflow class of first and second graders, so I would get put into the next grade. But I was still theoretically a first grader. So by the time I got into the end of grammar school, I was like, okay, like shoot me off to middle school, because like I'm with the older kids. And by the way, I was even younger than my own grade level, because I'm just a late birthday kind of girl. Yeah. And they wouldn't do it. So I kind of like did the 6th grade over again. So I was correcting papers, and like I didn't need to be a teacher's assistant, but actually that probably was something good for me. I was like kind of put in this unusual administrative position, leadership, if you will. So then I got into middle school, and once again, all my friends were the year older, and now they go off to high school. And like I'm stuck back in middle school. Mm-hmm. And I was always this kid, I was just chomping at the bit to somehow move ahead faster than the crowd. And when I got into high school, I said, I'm not letting that happen again. So I started taking correspondence courses from UC Berkeley and going to night school. And I skipped my junior year. But at the beginning of what should have been my junior year, I went with my mom in to see the principal. And I said, I did all these things. I took all these courses. And this year I'm going to be going to night school, and I'm going to have enough credits that I can graduate this year. And that wasn't what girls were supposed to do. That wasn't like following the rules. And he's like, well, how do I know you're going to finish everything? Why would I like say yes to this and make you a senior? And I was like, why wouldn't you just cheer me on?
Right.
You know, and I've always wondered if I was like a guy and I was an athlete and they thought, oh, we need to get him into college because he's going to be a star player. Maybe they would have reacted differently. My mom was not exactly a shy wallflower, so she like wasn't going to take no, and we just like pushed this guy until he finally said yes. And you know, even at the very end, the day that they were supposed to give you signed for your gowns, I was in the top 5% of the class, so I should have had a white gown instead of a burgundy gown. Right. But would he let me do that? No, there was one grade that was still yet to come in from UC Berkeley, and he wouldn't let me walk in the white gown. Like, why would people? Because I think it's because back in those days you were supposed to be like all the other girls and just follow the rules, and like I wasn't supposed to be this pushy little broad, and it's funny because if you would imagine me as some kind of gregarious, like I was the head of the student body or something. I wasn't. I was just like a normal girl. I just had this yearning to go faster than everybody else. And so I did. I graduated, and I was only 16. And my mom's like, I don't really care if you got accepted at Stanford and UCLA and Berkeley. You're not going there. Like, you're jailbait. So she had heard about this floating campus where you live on a ship and you go around the world. And she sent me on that. And her friends all said, are you out of your mind? You're sending your 16-year-old daughter around the world? Yeah. She said, you know what? I think I know my customer. I mean, I think I really have a sense of this young woman. And quite frankly, there's a lot more oversight on the ship than there is on an American college campus in the 60s, where they're all burning their bras and, having free sex.
Right.
1967, that was the year of I think they called the year of love or something. And so I was always that one, always pushing forward. And I guess I was also somehow always open to opportunities. Like it was a family friend who was over at dinner one night that said, you're coming out of college, you got to think about what you're going to be doing. I had no idea. Like, you ought to consider TV news. Like, why? There are no women on TV news. There's going to be. And that was the 70s. And, the women's movement was really in full swing, and they were suing all the different newspapers and trying to get more women hired. Right. And so I just picked up the phone the next morning. I could have just let that passing comment go. The next morning I picked up the phone and I called the news director at the station where this guy worked as an ad salesman. Yeah. And I got an interview and went in, and I was just asking him a million questions about the industry and about the future of maybe women in the industry. And he looked across the desk and said, well, clearly you know how to write an interview. Let me take you into the studio and audition you. It's like, really? So he took me down to the studio and put me on the news desk that I saw every night on television. Right. And auditioned me. And he was super complimentary and said, I think you have something. I think you have maybe that it factor, but I don't have a job for you. You just kind of walked in here out of the blue today. But the weatherman was back behind the set and saw that. And he followed me out into the parking lot. And he said, there are a few stations around the country who are putting weather girls on. I'd like to make you Sacramento's first weather girl, which sounded, by the way, totally uninteresting. But thank God somehow, the way my mom raised me, I knew an opportunity when I heard it. So I said, okay. Yeah. And he said, be at the studio at 5 o'clock Monday morning. I was like, as in a.m., 5 o'clock? Right. He's like, yeah, I do the weather on the radio in the morning for all of the Sacramento agricultural valley, which, is huge business. And I was there, and just little by little, it's maybe just having the kahunas, I don't know. Yeah. And being able to believe in yourself and believe in the possibility that maybe if you actually went ahead and looked into this, that maybe you could do it.
But that
even though you had zero experience.
Right. But so that was 1973. And then in 1975, you went to New York. So you moved to New York. And this was, so how did that transition happen? I'm curious.
So within 1 year, they moved from the weather they said, you want to do some consumer reporting? That's a brand new thing that certain stations are doing. I said, okay. And they said, okay, see if you can come up with enough stories. And I could have said, but I've never gone out and found stories, and I've never produced or written stories. But we lived in Sacramento. It was the capital of California. So I got in my car and I drove to the Department of Consumer Affairs and found their public relations people and said, if I'm going to be on as a consumer reporter, could you give me information about like product recalls? Right. And they were like, yeah, we're always trying to get our information on. Then I got in my car and I drove to the Department of Agriculture. Said, can you give me information about rising prices or bad, tainted food? They're like, yeah. And I went back in and I said to that news director, I could have a consumer report on every night. And believe me, I was convincing myself as much as I was convincing him. And I started doing it, and I just kind of made it up. And I mean, I didn't make up the information, but I had to just figure it out and do it. And that's kind of when my motto became if you ask my husband what's Joan Lunden's motto, he would say the page out of Joan Lunden's page book is, whenever anyone asks you if you can do something, just say yes, and then go figure out how to do it. And that's and very quickly after that, they said, do you think you want to maybe anchor and produce the new news? You know what I said? Sure. And I started doing that, and it became, the number one show very quickly. And it was a CBS affiliate across town. This was an NBC station. They brought in one of these news fixers, these companies that come into a market and they do a big research thing, and they say your weatherman should be an anchorman and your this should be that, or they should wear uniforms or whatever. Right. And they said the answer is to get rid of that new blonde girl over on NBC, over on that station. And they started sending my tapes all over the country. And by the way, I didn't know, that was in 1974, and we didn't have videotape machines then. They didn't sell those. And I didn't have a videotape of myself. And I was getting these calls from like Atlanta and Detroit, and these news directors saying, well, I saw your videotape. I was like, you did? I had no idea how they got it. And I went back to that ad salesman that first, told me about this idea and said, do you have any idea what's going on? And he kind of drilled down and figured it out. And he said, well, the grass isn't always greener. Yeah, you got these 5 stations calling you. You don't even know which stations are good or not. He said, but there is a guy who used to be the sales manager here, and he's in New York now working for ABC. Let me dial him, and he can ask him. So I called this guy, and he said, if you're getting all those offers, I'd like you to come into New York. We could use you here in New York at our flagship station, WABC. I was like, okay. And they brought me in to, I thought it was to anchor. I mean, because, come on, let's be honest, that's really kind of all I had done. And it turned out that it was actually to be a reporter, and then with the promise of anchoring on weekends sometime in the near future. I thought, never actually been a street reporter. And I kind of intimated that to them, you guys, you do realize that I was a weather person, a consumer reporter, and an anchor. Right. And I don't know what made them think being a street reporter in New York was so damn easy, because it was not. But I said yes, and I moved in 2 weeks and took over this job, and I kind of learned from the camera crews. You go out. In those days, there was no videotape. It was all on film. There was a lighting guy and a sound guy and a film guy. And I went to my first story, and it was at this bombing and conspiracy trial, because back then the Vietnam War was going on, and there were people blowing up recruiting offices. And so I went to this trial, and we got out of the car, and all the guys are pulling all their equipment out, equipment I'd never seen before. And the cameraman said, how many mags do you want? Mags. I don't think I'm going to have any time to read any magazines while I'm in there. Well, little did I understand, see, you probably know, that the magazine on a film camera is that big round thing on the top that houses the film. So he was asking me, do you think you're going to need 300 feet of film or 800 feet of film? Wow. So when they all stopped laughing and almost peeing in their pants, they thought it was so funny, the cameraman, I remember his name was Herb, and he said, okay, I think you need like a 500. That's okay. And I'm like walking next to him, and after about 100 yards, I said, psst, Herb, what's a mag?
Help.
And they realized amazing. That I didn't know what I was doing, but I was a nice kid. And they really taught me everything about street reporting. Yeah. But I was not exactly embraced with warm welcome arms there, because it was a very ethnic group at that station, which quite honestly is what had made them so popular. Because for the first time, instead of being all white males reporting the news, this news director had created a very diverse group of people that kind of resembled what it looked like on the streets of New York, and their ratings had soared. So now, as you can imagine, in the midst of that comes the blonde from California. And they're all like, what the heck?
You're like, you're already represented, lady. So let's talk about, Good Morning America. Let's talk about that. Just tell us, because, the whole story, just you going back to work after having Jamie. Let's talk about that. There's so many things to talk about. I don't know where to start, other than it's all just so interesting.
Well, the interesting thing is that the producers of network shows live in your hometown. They live in New York. And so the producers saw me on the news, like the local news at night. And I got called over, and I was like dumb enough to say, by the way, how did you find me? He's like, I see you every night on the news, you know. And so he asked me to come over. They were putting together, this was 1977. So they were, the show went on the air in late 75, and they were just kind of putting together their like family of reporters, and they were looking for a lot of young people to kind of build what they called a family, because they were doing something very different than the Today Show and CBS. Instead of having, faceless newscasters, they were pulling people in, and they created this set that looked like a home. Yeah. And they had a whole different atmosphere, sensibility to the show, which, of course, took off and dominated the ratings for several decades. And they hired me to do, they called it New Products and New Ideas. And I thought, come on, that's basically a consumer report. Right. How hard could that be? So, of course, I said yes. and from that, it kind of built. And then one morning, my phone rang about 5:30, and 6:30. And I thought, I'm not due into the newsroom until 8:30 today. So I answered the phone. It's the control room at Good Morning America. David Hartman called in sick, and Sandy Hill, who was the co-host at the time, she came in. She has laryngitis. She thought she could pull it off. She sounds too awful. Can you come over and help with the show? And I said, like, what do you want me to do on the show? And the producer said, all of it. It's like, okay. So I lived down the block. I like threw on some clothes. I ran down the block. I get in there at like right before the show's going on the air. I run up. They fix my makeup a little bit. The producers are saying, okay, you're going to start with this one. They're going to go to this. I mean, it's a 2-hour show. There's a lot of interviews in 2 hours. Oh, and, by saying yes, and this is like a central, as you know, if you read my book, it's a central, continuous reel that was going in the back of my head that I want to put in people's head. Listen for opportunities. Be open to opportunities. Yeah. When you hear one, don't think that, oh, God, that's going to be good for someone else. I mean, I got out of bed and went in that day, and that gave those producers for the very first time a chance to actually see me as a potential host. And believe me, that did the trick, because they started having me fill in, and, it eventually led to me getting the show.
But part of what I think is so fascinating about your story, and you guys, as I said at the top, this is Joan's new book, Life Beyond the Script. It's so exciting. It is a memoir. I'm loving it. That how you're wired, or how your whole saying yes to life, right? When the universe knocks, say yes. That there's a part of you that you had to be vulnerable, you had to be willing, even on that day when you weren't exactly sure how to do it, to fail. Like there's a part of you that was secure enough to go, I guess if I fall on my face, I'll be okay. So what is that part of you?
I mean, you have to be willing to say yes and take a chance of not necessarily being great, so that you get the opportunity to learn how to be great. I mean, there's really no other way than straight through. Same thing happened when I actually got the call. I was in the newsroom. I was in my little news cubby on my typewriter. That's a dead giveaway that you're old. And it was about a half an hour before we were going on the air, and I was trying to finish up my story, and my phone rang, and it was my agent, and he said, I just got the call from ABC. They're offering you the job as co-host of Good Morning America. And I was like, oh my God, that's great. I'll call you right after the show. I have to finish my story. And 20 minutes went by, and I was just ready to get up and walk into the studio, and my phone rang again. I figured he was calling me back. And it was my gynecologist's office. Congratulations, you're pregnant with your first child. And it's like, okay, what did the universe just do to me? And I guess as a woman, the expectation at that point in time, in 1979, would have been for me to say, oh man, bad timing. Like that really, that's just bad timing. But I never thought that. My thought was, how am I going to do it? How am I going to figure it out? How am I going to do it? And well, the first thing I did is I called my attorney and said, can they, like when I tell them this, can they rescind the offer? He said, lucky for you, this is 1979, and the federal government just passed legislation, literally just passed legislation that said businesses cannot discriminate against women due to pregnancy. So legally, they can't rescind the offer. And, as it turned out, I don't think they had really any idea. I don't think they had a clue that when I had the audacity to say, can I bring my baby to work because I'm breastfeeding, at a time when you weren't allowed to say the word breastfeeding on television.
Right.
It's hard to imagine that at that you couldn't say breastfeeding.
Wow.
I don't think that kudos to them for saying yes to me. But I don't think that they understood what they were saying yes to. I don't think they understood the positive response that was going to come from the audience, the ratings that we were going to get, because people understood that, wow, here's a woman, she's showing up and she's prepared, but oh, by the way, she's also dealing with spit up and diapers. And that was something they could relate to. And I think that it really, really propelled my popularity.
But it also did something culturally. There was something, you were this visible symbol of what was possible. And we really at that point hadn't had this, someone that everyone loved and was, you are and were very popular, like someone who's in your house every day. And now you're like, wait, she's bringing her baby to work? What is going on? And that, I really feel like that, I mean, you know this obviously, but this cultural shift, this planting seeds of what is possible for other women. And I wonder, did you get a lot of pushback for that as well? I was concerned that even though ABC said yes, that maybe my colleagues might not be so, joyful that I had this little baby in the office with me. And I had no idea how they were going to react. And everybody just kind of said, she's showing up. She was prepared for that interview. So I guess she's pulling it off. And it's interesting because if Gloria Steinem had done that, I don't think it would have been the same, because people looked at her as this bra-burning, flag-waving. I wasn't. Yeah. I was not a flag-waving feminist. I was just a young woman who was trying to put one foot in front of the other and do two things at once. And I think because I was that and I was doing it, that's why it had the impact. Yeah. But ABC expected this to be the best kept secret. And so they did this big press conference to announce that I was the new co-host. They thought that was the big news of the day. And they took me aside before I walked in, because it was a packed house. Time, Newsweek, Ladies' Home Journal, New York Times, Washington Post, they were all in there. And they were kind of like, wow, we got this great turnout, of the press.
Little did they know why. And they took me aside and said, whatever you do not say that you have a baby upstairs. These are critics. These writers will chew you up and spit you out. They will not think you can do this job if they know you have a baby here in the studio. So do not say anything. And I said, fine. I really didn't plan on bringing it up.
Right.
So David Hartman and I walk in. David Hartman introduces me. I say a few words, and I open it up to questions. First question, Time Magazine. We hear you're bringing your baby to work. How did you get ABC to say yes to that? Like your eyes dart back to the back of the room where all these executives are and these PR people who just told you not to say anything. But you can't not answer the question. It's a press conference.
No. Yep.
I said, well, actually, I asked ABC because I'm breastfeeding. Oops. And they have given me the right contractually to bring the baby to work with me. And next question, Newsweek magazine. But this show travels. What are you going to do when the show travels? Well, actually, they contractually have said that I can take the baby with me. Right. And I mean, it took about 10 minutes into that press conference for ABC to understand what was happening. That was the breaking news story of the day, that a major media corporation had allowed a working mom to bring her baby to work. And before the press conference ended, the PR guy comes into the studio with my baby in his arms and walks right up the center, aisle and puts her in my arms, and everybody's taking their pictures. And that was the picture that was on the front page of everything. Yep. And that was kind of the start of kind of the Joan Lunden journey or saga, or, nobody understood the ripple effect it would have corporately.
Right, but you have been on the forefront of societal change for women in this way, and I think you're right that your accessibility, your every woman quality, people feeling like they know you, it was more powerful because you weren't like a lightning rod, right? You were just doing your job, and that turned out to be something that was really major. Now you've got 7 kids, and you've written 11 books. So which one of those things shall we talk about?
Oh, the last one, the one that's coming up, the one that opens March 3rd. And, it's funny because when I just opened one of the first boxes that came in yesterday of the actual real book.
So
this
exciting.
Is the real book. This is where it all started.
Oh, what a babe.
Little
you guys
tiny
on YouTube,
babe.
You can see she's like a babe.
And when I opened this box, it was just totally different than any other book that I've written. Well, first of all, it's just taken so long because I think I started writing this at least 10 years ago, I can tell you, because I was already working on it when I got diagnosed with cancer.
Yes.
Then I felt compelled to write the book about that journey. I wrote the book called Had I Known. Then I kind of went back to it, but I was doing a ton of I've done 10 TV shows since GMA, but people don't realize that because they weren't on every day, every morning. Right. And I was doing a lot of campaigns about women's health, and I just felt this need to write a book about women and aging. So I wrote my last book, my funniest book ever, called Why Did I Come Into This Room? A candid conversation about aging. Funny because you can't talk about leaky bladders and hot flashes unless you're prepared to be funny.
Exactly.
And then,
indeed.
And then I took it up again. And I'll tell you, I wrote the book, turned it into my publisher, and she said, this is an autobiography. And that's kind of a collection of all the things that have happened in your life. It's kind of like Joan Lunden reporting on Joan Lunden's life, which right. I guess I should expect that of you because that's what you've done all your life. Your readers are going to want a memoir. Mm. And that's going to take them, don't tell them that you then had to turn the show down. Take them into the elevator ride up and walking into the room. And I'd never really done a book like, I'm a voracious reader. I love novels, but I'd never written a novel. So she put me together with a writer who I insisted that she get a byline here, Tamala Ridge, who's a wonder king of adjectives and setting scenes. And I feel like I took a master class over a course of a year. Now, the only thing is when you open up a story, for every story you open up, you have to leave 3 or 4 on the cutting room floor, which is so hard. Like, which ones am I going to really put in here that I feel contribute to this storyline that I'm putting out there and to what I want people to take away? Like, you just can't put in everything that you did. Like, yeah, it'd be fun to share it, but you just can't do that. Right. And so that's when, I kind of wrote the book and then I wrote it again in its entirety, a second time. And you know what? Thank God I did.
Yep.
Because I never could have come out with this book if I hadn't been pushed into doing that second challenge to put it into because now it reads more like you read a novel. And I think that's kind of cool.
No, I didn't get it that long ago. So what I've read so far, I absolutely love, because what it feels like when you're reading this book, you guys, is like you're there. So instead of you telling me, I feel like you're showing me, but I feel like I'm with you. So I think you guys did a great job on the book. I'm so happy that you did it, because it puts so much of what you've done in one place. But you've been such an advocate for change in your life. So what motivated you? You've testified before Congress to expand the Family and Medical Leave Act, right, to cover senior care. FDA to promote mandatory mammogram reporting act. You've done a lot of stuff like this. So what motivates you to advocacy work? Because it's time, effort, energy, bandwidth.
My dad was a cancer specialist back in a time when there weren't a lot of specialists. And in the early 60s, 50s, early 60s, and I was in awe of him, and I thought for sure I'd be a doctor. I went and worked in a hospital the summer before college. I found out pretty quickly that that was probably not going to be my profession, and that it took a certain personality to deal with stitches and scalpels. And so I became a psychology major. That was the closest I could get to medicine. It probably served me well in my career as a journalist. But I always had this little, I don't know if I would call it a burning desire or maybe even a little bit of a regret that I didn't kind of follow in his footsteps. Because I lost him when I was 13. He was speaking at a big cancer conference in Southern California. We're from Northern California. He crashed in our private plane and was killed at only 51 years old.
That's
and
terrible.
So, but I still just always had this thing that I felt compelled to follow somehow in his footsteps, because this is this thing that I was just in awe of. And interestingly, when I left GMA, everyone expected me to turn up on some other big show. Like, of course, that's what she's going to do. Frankly, I was exhausted. And by the way, I was so exhausted after 20 years of 3:30 wake-up calls that I'd actually gone to the network and said, can you put me on an evening news show, please? But they didn't have any place to put me.
Yeah.
So they kind of pushed me into signing another 3-year contract. It was like, all right. Like, I reluctantly said, okay, throw the stick one more time and I'll go catch it, But 3 months later, they came to me and said, we've decided to make a change. And they had that, this 30-year-old Joan Lunden lookalike. And it felt like they were taking it away from me, because they were, but it was hard for me to remember that I'd also just asked for it. And so I said to myself, how are you going to play this? I said, I don't play the woman scorned. That's just not me. And so I decided to call up the president of the network, and I did. And I said, I'm going to help you help yourself. I said, remember when NBC did this and they replaced Jane Pauley with Deborah Norville? How'd that work out for them? Not so good. And you're about to do the same thing. Yep. So here's how I am going. This is what I'm going to offer you. I'll say that it's my choice to leave. I said, because I've been asking you to get off the morning shift. I'll say it's my choice to live so I can live a more normal life and like pursue other things. And I was like silence on the phone, and the guy that was president at the time said, "Really? You would do that?" Like they couldn't believe that this woman who just got something taken away from them was going to come out and say, that's okay. I wanted to leave anyway. I'm leaving and I'm looking forward to whatever I'm going to do next.
Right. Because they're sparing them the PR nightmare, though, is what you were sparing them.
Oh my God, I spared them a huge PR disaster.
Yep.
And so when it came time to write the book, though, Terri, I'll tell you that I really wrestled with how I was going to write this. And I wrote a first version, and I wasn't very nice to ABC in that first version, so I got it out of my system.
Yeah.
And then I rewrote it. And you know why? For the same reason that I chose to spin the story and tell it the way it would serve me best. And by the way, in the show best, I wasn't looking to, and there was still a big irate reaction from the audience because, people at home, oh, she's leaving to be with her kids. Yeah, right. And so a lot of people realized that they were taking me off the show,
right.
At 47, 48 years old to put a 30-year-old on. And the audience doesn't always feel good, even to see it happen to someone else.
Sure.
And now when I'm writing this, I said, so once again, if you bury the hatchet with the something end up, I said, what are all the quotes that you've always gone by? Like, where do you want to do the PR for this book? Probably on Good Morning America. Half the book happens on Good Morning America. So, like, is there really a need to, like, be the scorned woman now? You've never lived that your entire life. So why don't you, like, follow your own direction and treat this in the same way? But at the same time, you can't sugarcoat it. You have to be honest, because that's what writing a legacy memoir is about, is owning it. And like, I don't know if you've gotten that far, but I own it. I say, you know what? I was exhausted. Maybe I wasn't paying a close enough attention. Maybe if I'd been going into the corner office after the show and tooting my own horn and, pushing my way in, maybe if I'd leaned in a little bit more, I'd still be there. So I kind of decided, like, how are you going to tell this, and what do you want people to take away from it? One, if it happens to you, you can write your own story. You can write your own story any way you want, because that's going to serve you with however you're going to reinvent yourself and how you're even going to show up in your life for your family. And how about even showing up for yourself and talk that self-talk about your self-worth and what you're all about. And I mean, that's almost equally as important. And now here you are telling this story in the book. Own it. Own everything that you did wrong then, so that you, like, lay it all out there. But there was a little bit of a fear in me that people would read and say, oh, man, she told us she was leaving to be with her kids.
Yeah.
And I was like, you got to say it. You got to put it out there and let them understand why you chose to do that, and that it actually was best. It was best for me. It was best for the network. And quite honestly, it was just best for the viewer. Not to, like, make a big, huge, scandalous thing out of it.
Right. But again, though, that's a different way of, even you just calling the head of the network, that's a different way of being empowered. The same way that it didn't enter your mind, you were like, can I bring my baby to work? Not realizing, wow, this is unprecedented. That wasn't why you did it. It's really what you wanted to do, and you asserted that. And I feel like there's a theme throughout this memoir and throughout your life of asserting yourself in ways that were unprecedented at the time. And it's just so, I don't know, I just love all the stories that I've read so far in the book are so great. And I just so appreciate you coming on, talking about it. I have one last question for you.
Okay.
That I ask people. You guys, by the time this comes out, the book will already be out. So you can get this book everywhere fine books are sold. It is called Life Beyond the Script, just Joan. It's all about Joan Lunden's life. The question for you is, personally, what has been your most challenging boundary struggle, and how have you overcome it if you have? I ask all my guests this question because I'm obsessed with boundaries.
I have this obsession of saying yes to everything. And I mean, in a way, it's wonderful because so much comes to me, even since GMA, during those years of GMA and since GMA, when you have a platform like that, you're just asked to do so many things.
Yep.
I sometimes have a habit of saying yes to a lot of things and then kind of getting burned out. And even during those years of balancing work and motherhood, yes, I was setting boundaries. I mean, I set boundaries with my bosses that I had to be there for every school conference, for every school play, for all the important things. But I also thought it was important to add that when I did that, I started it by saying, you know me, when I do a job, I give 150%.
Yep.
And I'm going to give you 150%. But I do need to have a little bit of back and forth here boundaries. So I'm also going to say that I also want to be the mother that I want to be. And therefore, I want to make sure that you understand that if you have something important going on, and I do too, because it's my kid's graduation, I'm going to be at my kid's graduation. And I think they appreciated the fact that they knew where we both knew where we stood, and it wasn't done in a threatening way. It was done in a way that let's do this so that we can work together and I can be the person I want to be. But it also wasn't done in a way that you just go, like when you get that wonderful baby news, it's not always so wonderful to the boss when you sit down across from them. So don't just go in and share it because you just think it's so wonderful. Go in with a plan that's going to make that boss feel a little more comfortable about the fact that you're not going to be there 100% over the next 9 months.
Right. That's great so much. I super appreciate your time. You guys, the book is Life Beyond the Script. Joan Lunden, here you go. It's available everywhere. Go get it. You're going to love it. And thanks again, Joan, for all that you've done for all of us. I really appreciate you.
Totally my pleasure. Thank you.